Hello everybody, this is Alexandra Bartfeld and you're watching the OrganTalk. Guys, welcome back here. I'm very excited and thrilled to announce our today's guest. He's a composer, he's a conductor, he's a pianist, he's an organist, of course, and I'm just so excited to ask him so many questions. We're talking today to Alexandra Frey, everybody, and this is a legendary person, doesn't need to be introduced, and yeah, I'm just waiting for him to join us, and yeah, it's a very exciting moment for me. I hope you're all doing great this weekend, you're enjoying vacations, I hope, and I see that Alexandra is already here with us, so let's get started. I will send out an invitation. Let's hope it will work. As usual, let's keep our fingers crossed. It's working. Perfect. Hi. Hello.
Hello. Can you hear me all right?
I do. I can hear you very well. Guys, please let us know if there are any problems with the sound, but I can hear everything perfectly.
Oh, terrific. Hello.
Thank you so much for taking your time and joining us for the conversation. It's an honor to have you here.
Well, it's an honor to be here. Thank you very much, Alexandra.
Thank you. I have so many questions to you, and you know that our viewers have been sending in tons of questions. I couldn't post all of them.
Okay.
So I think because since we are limited in time, only by an hour by the Instagram's policy,
yes.
we'll just
all right,
dive in.
Go ahead.
Are you ready?
Fire away.
Yes, and I will start with a very simple question everyone gets to answer. It's your way into the music and your experience of musical study.
How I started, you mean?
Yeah.
Well, I started studying with the piano teacher of my mother, whose name was Gavin Williamson, and he was really a legendary figure. He lived in Paris, by the way, since you live by Paris. He lived in Paris throughout the whole 1920s. And he became a very prominent member of the intellectual and artistic circles there. He was very close friends with Gertrude Stein and her partner Alice B. Toklas, both who were buried in Père Lachaise. And he was also very close friends with Igor Stravinsky, Francis Poulenc, Maurice Ravel, and he was there in Paris to study harpsichord with Wanda Landowska.
Oh God, all those names.
And to study organ with Joseph Bonnet. He heard Widor and Vierne play every week. It's incredible, just incredible. And he took Stravinsky to see Gone with the Wind when it first came out, the great movie.
Really? Oh my God!
Yes, in the United States. But and all of these people stayed with him in Chicago when they would pass through town in his 17-room mansion. He was a great pianist. He was the pianist for some of the greatest singers of the 20th century, the first part of the 20th century. Claudio Muzio, Rosa Poncel, Mary Garden, people like that, Rosa Raiza, and Joan Sutherland early in her career, before her husband took over. And he was a member of a 2-harpsichord team. My teacher's name was Gavin Williamson, and his partner was Philip Manuel, his duo partner. And they both were there to study with Landowska. And they started the first early music festival in the United States. In the 1930s, it was called the Chicago Festival of Ancient Music. They made the very first recordings of the Bach multiple keyboard concerti on their big Pleyel harpsichords with members of the Chicago Symphony. They were soloists with every major orchestra in the United States and in Europe. And in fact, here in Berlin, they were supposed to play the triple concerto with Landowska, and with Furtwängler and the Berlin Philharmonic, but she canceled because she was very angry because the duo decided to buy their second set of Pleyels directly from Pleyel rather than through Landowska, thereby depriving her of commission. However, they did end up coming here, and instead they did the double C major concerto instead. So, and he spoke 6 languages. He was an Oxford fellow. He was a brilliant intellectual and a brilliant musician. To tell you how brilliant he was and why he was the most sought-after accompanist of his time, he knew all of the songs of Schubert, Schumann, Brahms, Wolf. I'm back. He knew the songs, all the songs of Brahms, Schubert, Schumann, Strauss, Wolf, Ravel, and Debussy from memory.
Oh God.
He was the first accompanist to ever play entire concerts from memory. He knew the texts of all of the songs from memory. And I know this because I learned sight reading first by playing Bach chorales, and then I graduated to song cycles. And he would play the voice part completely from memory at the next piano, and I would at the other Steinway, and I would be at the other Steinway playing the accompaniment. So he was the largest and most important musical influence on my life. He knew me since I was 2 weeks old, because my mother, who studied with him before I was even born, brought me over to the house, and he held me in his arms when I was 2.5 weeks old. And he died at the age of 92, so I studied with him for 22 years. I started at the age of 7, and I learned so much from him. When I was in my first year of piano, I joined the men and boys choir of St. Luke's Episcopal Church in Evanston, Illinois, which has a very famous organ, an E.M. Skinner, 4 manuals of about 85 ranks, and it was one of Skinner's own favorite instruments. And the organist choir master at the time, I don't know whether you know him, Alexandra, his name was Karol Paukert, and he was a great Czechoslovakian virtuoso who was one of the world's most important orchestral oboists before he became an organist. He was the principal, one of his positions was principal oboe of the Reykjavik Philharmonic. And so he became an organist after having played all of the orchestral repertoire. Sure. And he was our organist choir master. And I heard the finest repertoire playing, service playing, and improvisation that one could hear as a young man, as a boy. And I remember the first time I was in my first Sunday singing in the choir, hearing that magnificent instrument. He played the Liszt BACH for the postlude, for the sortie, for the sortie.
Wow.
And I remember I was actually, because it was one of my first Sundays, I was sitting in the back benches right by the console, and I remember being hit by this wave of sound in the first hymn. And I said to myself out loud, I want to do that. So I went to Gavin Williamson, my piano teacher, and I said, can I also start studying organ too? This is after about a half a year of piano. And Gavin made one of the wisest decisions. He was really my father figure in many ways. I mean, he helped raise me. And he made one of the wisest decisions. He said, I'll tell you what, you're going to study with me intensely on piano for 4 years before you ever start studying the organ. And he said, I will give you elements of organ technique. For example, finger substitution and thumbing, and all of these things, and a beautiful legato. So because he was also an organist and a harpsichordist, Gavin gave me this beautiful legato. I don't think I barely used the pedal in those 4 years on the piano, but I learned how to play everything and have incredible control. And he was a student, he was one of the last Leschetizky products, Gavin. So my playing is direct from Leschetizky. And then after Leschetizky died, he studied with Arthur Schnabel. He was not a masterclass student. Schnabel had about 6 or 7 full-time students that he taught for years, and Gavin was one of them. And he also studied with Ethel Leginska, who was another Leschetizky student. So Schnabel and Leginska were both Leschetizky students as well. And so he passed all of that on to me, you see, as well as everything he learned from Landowska. And when he died, he left me his Steinway on which I had my lessons. It was here in my apartment in Berlin, in my studio. And I have scores with Schnabel's writing in them.
Oh, God.
I also own Schnabel's portable practice piano. he had it was in a box, and he would take it with him on trains and so forth, and it's silent. But you can push a button, and then it makes a click, 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 click when you play. So
Is
you
it
can
like
hear the
a
rhythm.
tiny piece you can put on your knees, or how is it?
Is it like what?
Is it like a tiny piano? How is it to practice?
No, it's 5.5 octaves, I think, 6 octaves, and it's in a wooden case, and you can put it on a table in your lap or wherever, and the top comes like this, and the bottom comes out, so you can really play, and you can hear by pulling a switch. You can hear the tick 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 every time you play, so you can hear your rhythm, or it can be completely silent. And Schnabel would use this on trains and so forth, and in hotels when he wasn't at a piano. So I have all these Gavin's scores, and I have his books, and he and my parents fostered my love of reading. He read every night till 3 in the morning, and I did this as a child and would fall asleep at the breakfast table. So I mean, I learned so much from him about music and about life and about history. He told me all about life in the 20s in Paris, and of all the people and through the years with whom he worked. I mean, he played with the greatest conductors. Kusevitsky, Munch, everyone, really.
I can just sit and listen to these names.
Well, next time in Paris, we'll have a coffee and I'll tell you all about it. I can't believe that I was there for 5 weeks playing at the American Cathedral, and I never met you.
Yeah, I mean,
I was just there in March and April, living at the cathedral.
Yeah, I've heard so much about you from Andrew, so...
He's one of my dearest friends. He's really sweet, and he's one of the world's greatest organists.
And I think he's watching right now, so...
Yeah, so Andy,
Hi, Andy.
Andy, you can use that as a quote in your reviews from me. But I've told him that to his face many times. And every night, practically, while I was there, because the curfew was in Paris, and so we would order in sandwiches and open up a bottle of wine and talk till literally 2, 3 in the morning, almost every night. Here I was in Paris, I barely slept. But we made a very good video together of a piece for 2 organists called Martyrs by Kenneth Layton. And it's on YouTube, and I made some other videos at the cathedral on YouTube as well. So anyway.
Yeah, Cathedral had a big expansion on YouTube during the lockdown. It's really amazing.
I played for all the congregational services, and Andy was so busy directing and producing all the videos and playing for the recorded stuff, he brought me in to play for the services. So, yes.
Yeah, I'm just thinking back about all those people and this great school, and how lucky is just want to be in touch with this culture from very early age. This is really a gift someone can have. This is really amazing.
My parents took me to the Chicago Symphony a lot, and I would go with Gavin a lot and sit in his box. I saw the greatest conductors and soloists. I saw Vladimir Horowitz. I saw the greatest singers. George Schulte was the music director. Claudio Abbado and Carlo Maria Giolini were the principal guest conductors. Oh my word, it was this amazing childhood I had, full of music. And my mother was a world-class pianist, but she chose to be a housewife and a mother. But she practiced 6 hours a day, and I heard all of the core repertoire of the piano. Brahms concerti, Mozart, Beethoven sonatas and concerti in my house. Ravel, everybody.
Oh God, this is just so amazing. I just will remind you, our viewers, that I have tons, really, you cannot believe it, of questions. And by the way, today is a special Braille edition, so I have my questions all written in Braille. And you guys, your viewers, you're welcome to ask your questions here at the comment section. So don't hesitate.
I wondered if you read Braille, because I know you teach at the Institute for the Blind.
Yeah, I do.
Fantastic. Well, you're amazing. That's incredible. And by the way, you're a great composer. That piece, Body Electric, you've got to write more music. That was, first of all, and it was riveting. It was interesting from the beginning to the end. And there's a little bit of Bernstein's Prelude and Fugue and riffs in there too, by the way.
Makes me blush. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Thank you so much. I actually, I've been reading through your website and just trying to dig more information about you, more than just videos on YouTube. And I just thought, this is an organ talk. but this is so much outside of the organ topic, which I could ask you. And why don't I ask you about your playing for Dalai Lama? Because it's what I read and impressed me so much.
Well, I mean, for years I've been invited by the diplomatic community to play for various heads of state. And I played for the Dalai Lama. He was here in Berlin, but it wasn't a state visit. In fact, he met with, was Schröder or Merkel, the chancellor then? He met with her, but it was not a state visit. It was a quick drop-by. And there was a little thing for him, and so I played. I even looked to see if I could find any Tibetan music or anything like that, but I ended up playing Bach and so forth. And he came up to the piano afterwards, and of course, the first thing that I was confronted with is, what do I call him? Mr. Dalai, Mr. Lama, Your Holiness. I called him Your Holiness, and he came up to the piano and he went like this. Oh, that was wonderful. I said, thank you. And I thought, well, what do I say next? And so I said, you've been to Berlin before? Oh, yes. I said, do you get a chance to see any of the city? Oh, no, unfortunately, no, because of security. I go to one place, go visit, and then I go to the airport. So, but he was a very, one thing that impressed me about him is that he had time for everybody who came up to speak to him. You know, and the fact that he came up to me, I mean, he made an effort to come to the stage, or wherever the piano, I can't remember whether it was on stage or it was on a little tiny stage, and he made an effort to come, to leave everybody, all the VIPs, and come directly to me and speak to me. That, I was terribly impressed by that.
I was just so curious to know how to live such a moment and how special it could be.
Well, I mean, I've played for many presidents. As a matter of fact, this past year I played for the president of Egypt and the president of Singapore.
Wow.
Who is a woman. Oh, and I also played for another female president. Is it Latvia? I think
Lithuania.
Lithuania. I played for the Lithuanian president as well. That's right. So last year I played for 3 presidents.
Wow.
And they're all really gracious. I have to tell you, really, seriously. And what's interesting is that the Minister of Culture for Egypt is a friend of mine, Ines Abdullah, and she is the first female Minister of Culture for the whole country. She was, 2 weeks ago I played with the Cairo Symphony Orchestra in Egypt.
Yeah.
I was soloist in Rhapsody in Blue. And when this was my 5th concert with that orchestra. My first concert ever was conducting a concert performance of the complete Otello by Verdi. And Ines was back then the principal flutist. She'd studied in Paris with Ram Paul. The next time I returned to the orchestra to conduct 2 concerts, she was the head of the opera, the Intendantin. She was the head of the conservatory. And she was still principal flutist. And so then, in November 2019, before the lockdown, I played again with the orchestra. I conducted them 3 times and been soloist twice. And so in November 2019, I played with them, and she was the Minister of Culture. So last year, when I played for the president of Egypt, I was joking with a member of his delegation. I told him the story about she was principal flutist and the head of the opera and the conservatory, and now she's Minister of Culture. And I said, the next time I return to Cairo, she'll probably be president.
Looks like nothing is impossible for this person.
Anyway, so I've been very fortunate because I've made a lot of acquaintances and actually a couple of friendships with heads of state and with diplomats and so forth. And I represent both Germany and the United States when I do that, of course, being a long-time resident, permanent resident here, and still an American citizen.
I have actually a few questions about that. I don't know if it will be polite to ask you what was your role.
Ask me anything you want.
I want to ask you why did you stay in Germany? Why did you come to Germany?
Well, that's a very interesting story. I always wanted to live in Europe. It was a big dream of mine. I mean, I prayed to go. And I read in the newsletter of the Chicago chapter of the American Guild of Organists that there was a position open in Berlin as a one-year sabbatical replacement as organist and choir director of one of the Evangelische Kirche here in Tegel, which is in the north part of the city in West Berlin. And I applied for the job, and I got it. And it came with the apartment of the Kirchenmusikerin, the church musician of that church. And so I had this apartment. I arrived the day before the reunification, October 2nd, 1990. So it was 10 months after the wall was open. But the wall, you know, was still standing throughout the city. It took them a long time. It took a few years to tear it down completely. And so I had... I arrived, and of course, there was still, you knew when you were in East Berlin and you knew when you were in West Berlin. The city wasn't quite unified. But my first day here, East Germany officially still existed. And the next day, boom, it was gone. So, and I made my way. I got to know all the church musicians in town. There was a reception for me that one of them had, and because at that time there was a lot more work than there were musicians, after I established myself, I was so busy. My phone was ringing all the time. I played continuo on organ and harpsichord. I played recitals on piano, organ, and harpsichord. I played concerti on all three. I was accompanying people. I was playing solo recitals. It was a wonderful time to be here in the 90s because, as I said, there was more work than there were musicians. Now it's changed.
Yeah.
Umgekehrt.
Yeah, by the way, we've never met in Berlin either. I've been there for 8 years, and we've never met.
Well, we'll see each other in Paris or here or the
we have a time now.
Absolutely. But as I said, I've enjoyed watching your videos. I loved your Vierna Toccata. Fabulous.
Thank you. My question then is, how did it feel to change from being let's say, American organist or American musician to this German Kirchenmusik style?
Well, I mean, I was a church musician. At that time, when I got that job, I was the assistant organist of the Episcopal Anglican Cathedral in Chicago, St. James. And so the tradition, of course, was different, being a German Lutheran tradition. But I adapted pretty quickly. And everybody was very kind to me.
Well, this is great because I mean this is so different from even from one city to another and from one culture to a different one. It's just even a bigger difference. We have a question there in the comment section. Just let me find it. The question is: you are honorary citizen of something is not working here. I'm sorry. I have to figure it out.
Of Bari, Italy.
Yeah. Yes. What were the circumstances of this honor presented?
I had conducted. Well, I just conducted the orchestra of that city in May. In fact, it was my first post-lockdown concert. I conducted the last symphonies of both Haydn and Mozart. Haydn 104, the London Symphony, and the Mozart 41, the Jupiter Symphony. And so it was one of the first concerts for them, and my first concert was exciting. You know what? I actually, truthfully, have no idea. I was told the first or second time I conducted that orchestra that somehow a decision had been made to make me and my soloist honorary citizens. I think Bari was designated a cultural city one year. Maybe that was the year. I'm not quite sure. And maybe because of my credentials, and also, you know, I was the music director of a major Italian symphony orchestra for 8 years. So that could be it. I mean, I was very well established in Italy. And so after the concert, with the audience all there, the mayor came out, the head of the police, and I don't know, somebody from the military, and there was this big hoopla, and they gave me, wait, do I have them here? Where are they? Oh, here it is. I'll show you. Wait just a moment. It's on my desk. And so they you know, there was this big ceremony, and they were let's see, let me open it. Hold on, I have to put this down. for a moment. And, you know, they made speeches and so forth, and then they gave me this and a medal and maybe a sash or something. I can't remember. It was 2000, it was before 2010. And there it was, honorary citizen.
Well, it means you really, really touch them, I think.
Well, I hope so. I mean, this, as I said, this is the 5th time I've been invited back to that orchestra. And I love working with them. And Marco Renzi, their music director, is just fantastic. And it's a wonderful orchestra. And I've made friends in that orchestra, as well as in the city.
That's great. There is something else I discovered about you when I was reading more about you, is that you have this talent of learning very fast as a conductor, and I assume as a performer,
Yes.
as an instrumentalist. Do you have any tips and tricks of learning for viewers?
Well, when you learn a symphony overnight, you learn millions of notes, much more than if you're learning a solo piece or even a concerto. You have to know what everybody is doing. And I have a very, I mean, in addition to being a very emotional person, in addition to being a very emotional person, my Greek heritage, my mother's Greek, I'm also a very analytical person. And so I analyze, and I had wonderful theory teachers in school, and so I analyze things very quickly, and I can see the big picture as well. And I can't explain it. I've always had that ability, and as a result, you know, I've been called to jump in many times. And I stay up. I never forget it. I got called to conduct in Greece. My manager sent me a text at about 4 in the afternoon, 3 in the afternoon. I was coming out of a funeral, actually, of a friend who had passed away. And I said, okay, fine. And I got home, and I studied all night long. I drank so much coffee, and I just studied and studied and studied and studied the whole program. And at 6 o'clock in the morning, I jumped into the shower, packed a suitcase, and went to the airport and flew to Athens. My rehearsal was the next day, so fortunately I could sleep a bit, and then in the evening I studied again. But I've had all sorts of things like that happen all over the world. I've flown to Asia overnight, you know, to conduct a program, you know, and I just do it. I can't explain it. It's just what I do.
Just do it. This is great. I mean, it's not given to everybody, and I think it was quite a mental training to be able to see the bigger picture and the details at the same time.
Well, I attribute this, of course, as well to my piano teacher, Gavin Williamson, who taught me how to sight read from the beginning. And I think that's very important. You know, and of course, talent plays a role in it. You have to have that. But anyway, so yes. It's challenging, but I like it.
It must be, I mean, well, I do that from time to time playing organ, and I get this incredible dose of adrenaline when I do that.
Oh, sure, yes. Yes, you have to.
Yeah, there was a question from one of our viewers, completely changing the topic, about your experience with Bernstein.
Well, I have to give you the very short version of that, because we met when I first played in New York. His manager, Harry Kraut, felt that we should meet. And so I played, it was in 1985, and I played with a very famous violinist by the name of Ruggiero Ricci. My back, yes. I was playing with a very famous violinist by the name of Ruggiero Ricci on the day of Bach's 300th birthday. And we played an all-Bach concert. And it was the New York concert. the only one on the day celebrating Bach's 300th birthday. And everybody who was anybody in the New York musical scene was there. It was sold out. I remember looking through the window in the door and seeing Robert Mann, the principal violinist of the Juilliard Quartet, take his seat in the front row. Anyway, but it was arranged that I would go to Bernstein's apartment after the concert. And I arrived there at 10:30, and he had actually not been feeling well. He had been to Brazil, gotten back to Brazil a few days before, and he had a stomach bug, and he was really having a difficult time. I thought I would be there for 20 minutes. I arrived at 10:30 at night. I went literally right from the stage into a taxi after taking bows, and I thought I would be there maybe 20 minutes at the most. I arrived at 10:30. I left between 4:30 and 5 in the morning. We talked about everything under the sun, and clearly we had a real friendship. And I would go visit him subsequently when he would have time, when he would come back from being on the road for months, and he would be entering his composing period, and he would take about 2 or 3 weeks where he wouldn't do anything. He would just socialize and relax, because he had to clear his head of all the composer's notes that he had conducted and find his own voice again, find his own notes. And so I would go to New York when he would come back from being on the road for this period and visit him. And I became a confidant. He became a confidant of mine too. Oh, the things I told him. And we developed a really wonderful friendship based on trust, and I never asked him for anything for my career. I think that also played a big part in it. I never had an agenda for myself. And I just really enjoyed the friendship, and I learned a lot from him. And he would say to me, I was studying with Gustav Meyer at the University of Michigan, who was one of the most important conducting teachers of our time. And he was a friend of Lenny's, and he was also head of the conducting department at Tanglewood. And so I would be sitting there having drinks. We'd drink and smoke all night long. Well, Lenny would smoke, but I would drink with him. I didn't smoke. And he would say, by the way, what are you working with Gustav? What are you working on with Gustav now? And I would say, Symphonie Fantastique. He said, let me see you conduct the opening. Conduct the opening for me. And I said, oh, okay. So I would start doing it, and said, keep going, don't stop, keep going. I would be singing through it while conducting it and so forth. And then the next thing I know, I would have a lesson for an hour. And the other thing is that I was really one of the very few, probably maybe even the only young conductor who was interested in his music. Well, one of a small group. Most of the conductors wanted to study Brahms and Schumann and Mahler with him, but nobody really took an interest in his music.
Which is a treasure.
Which is a treasure. And I, when I first met him, I had already studied his first 2 symphonies. And he liked the fact that I illicitly snuck the scores out of the University of Michigan School of Music library, which was not allowed. But I took them home and I worked on them. And so I worked on those pieces with him, and also we discussed the symphonic dances from West Side Story, which years later I've conducted many times. And after he died, I had not performed any of his music while he was alive, and I knew him the last 5.5 years of his life. And I joined him on tour a few times as well as going to New York a lot to see him when he would come home. And but after he died, I learned all of his piano music, and I made one of the very first recordings of his complete piano music. And I was the first person to ever perform his complete piano music in public. And I actually have given... Oh, and then some years after that, I had a hunch. He'd written a version of Peter Pan for Broadway, and there were 4 songs, and I just had the funny feeling he'd written more. I discovered a whole hour's worth of totally unheard Leonard Bernstein music. Some of it was in piano vocal form, and we had to orchestrate it. Some of it was already orchestrated, but we had to make corrections and so forth. I worked on this thing for a few years. And I conducted the world premiere recording. I conducted the world premiere performance of the full score of Peter Pan in Portugal, outside of Lisbon, with the Gulbenkian Orchestra. And then I conducted the first stage production of it. So I've actually given the world premieres, first performances of 4 Bernstein works. 3 are piano works: the 13 anniversaries, the 5 anniversaries, and his Valse Gaia, and then and then Peter Pan. And what's interesting, this is very interesting because here he was the most chronicled composer of the 20th century, and yet there were pieces of his that he wrote and were published, but nobody played publicly. And so Jack Gottlieb, who was the great Bernstein archivist, confirmed my performances. Actually, some of the works were not published. I take that back. So I gave 4 Bernstein world premieres.
Wow.
Yeah. And you
Wow,
see,
this is
it's one of those things, Sasha, where you see the people can conduct Mahler, they can conduct Stravinsky. Michael Tilson Thomas is one of the very few people who knew Stravinsky personally, who's still alive. Michael is, and I played organ with him, by the way, as soloist with San Francisco Symphony. But I was going to say that, so you can conduct all these composers of the past, and you might have an identification. But when I conduct Bernstein or I play Bernstein, I have all of these stories, which are mine, that I experienced, and all the things that he told me, and the jokes, and the very private stories, which of course I would never repeat because they were told to me in confidence. And I respect that. And those stories are mine, and I bring them to the music when I perform Lenny's music.
This is just amazing. And you are in touch with such a great culture and such a huge baggage of music. This is just makes me smile.
Oh, well, thank you. But all of this comes to bear when I play the organ. I grew up on symphonic. The first thing I thought that first day that I heard the organ at St. Luke's was, this is a symphony orchestra with keyboards, and I still look at the organ that way. And so my first organ teacher was Richard Webster, who was the organist choir master at St. Luke's. Well, he was the assistant when I started studying with him when Carl was there, and then Carl left and he took over. And so he gave me a great fundamental. And then I studied with Edward Mondello, who's the university organist of the University of Chicago, who studied for years with Heinrich Fleischer, who studied with Straube. And so I got the Straube tradition directly. And Eddie taught, he was so influenced by Fleischer, who was really a great exponent of Straube. And so when I studied Franck and Widor and so forth with Edward Mondello, the university organist of the University of Chicago, he taught it in the Straube tradition, the French repertoire. And then I went to the University of Michigan and studied with Robert Glasgow, who was a student of Harold Gleason's, who was a student of Bonnet's. And so I got the direct French tradition from Tournemire, Franck, Tournemire, Bonnet, Gleason, and Glasgow. And actually, because Gavin had been a student in Paris in the 20s of Bonnet, I'm a Bonnet grandchild, and through Glasgow, I'm a Bonnet great-grandchild. So both those traditions are actually very complementary. The Straube is the symphonic way of looking at all music, and the French music, of course, is based on the great instruments that they have there.
And it's true that there are 2 different but symphonic traditions, which is very interesting.
Yes,
which developed.
Exactly. And so if you hear on YouTube, there's a performance of mine of the Franck chorale in A minor. I studied that with Edward Mondello.
I have questions. Please tell us about that.
Well, what you're hearing, I know this now that now that I've grown up, but I learned that piece when I was 14 years old with him. And I don't play it that much differently. Well, I play it a bit differently. But what I know is what you are hearing in that performance is the Straube tradition. Well, it also is more than that. It also comes from the fact that I've conducted so much Franck. And I've played, in addition to all the organ works, I played many of the piano works. I know your beautiful Franck performance of the Prelude and Chorale and Fugue, yes. Gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous. Beautiful performance. But, I've conducted the D minor symphony. I've conducted Siche, his great tone poem. I did another tone poem. I've conducted the symphonic variations. I've played some of the two big piano works, and I played the sonata in A major. And I mean, I've conducted the D minor symphony probably about 5 or 6 times.
Wow.
And you know something? That's where I come from as an organist with that repertoire. And that's even where I come from when I played Vierne and Widor. I come from really a symphonic tradition, not as much as Straube as also my experience as a conductor. You know, in the chorale in A minor, in the slow section, I use the English horn and tremulant accompanied by strings and flutes. But and I remember some doctoral student came up to me after, said, "Oh, you didn't follow the performance practice with the trompette and the hautbois." And I said, well, yes, I did, because that combination of English horn and oboe, accompanied by strings, was one of Franck's favorite combinations in his orchestral works. It's the first third of the slow movement of the D minor symphony. It's in Siche. He loved that sound, and you know, so could you imagine a trumpet player in an orchestra playing that tune? No, of course not. It really is an English horn solo or an oboe solo.
Which brings me to a question. I've been recently trying to explain to someone a difference between French and American organs, because this is such a complicated, I mean, the sound matter, the sound conception of American organs is so symphonic, but it's still different from the French symphonic tradition.
Well, symphonic, in terms of the French organ tradition of cavaille-colle, is a loose term, whereas in the United States it's a literal term. You have on the United States French horns and English horns and hautbois and orchestral oboes and all kinds of celestes and flutes of all kinds. The tremulants are different. The principals have a more rounder, a British sound perhaps. I'm talking about the great symphonic organs in my native country. Whereas Cavaille-Coll looked in terms of symphonic, I think he was thinking of groups of sound. The strings, the principals, the foundations, the foam. As a group, you combine them together and you have this rich texture. And then you have the reeds in the box. You have the whole brass section, not one instrument like the English horn. You have the entire brass section. And of course, depending on what you have with it and how much the box is closed, I think that's what he was thinking more in terms of texture rather than a literal imitation of the instruments of the orchestra.
Yeah, that's a great point. I don't have that much of experience with American instrument. I mean, my only experience with American type of instrument is the International Touring Organ by our dear friend Cameron Carpenter.
Oh yes, I remember the first time he played it publicly. I was there, and after everybody left, he gave me a private demonstration. I like it. A lot of people criticize it. I think it's just jealousy, but I think it's a fantastic instrument because I love I mean, Marshall and Ogle build fantastic instruments. You see, and before anybody starts saying, you've just advocated a digital instrument, well, to me, all I care about is how it serves the music. That's all I care about in the end.
Thank you so much, because it was my next question. What is your take on that? Because I know that not everybody are feeling so optimistic about, or just so excited about this instrument. I spent a night, like few hours late night at this organ, and I was it was one of my biggest impressions of an organ that I ever had.
Well, of course, it's a very unusual instrument. It has things you hardly would ever find on pipe organs, like a French horn celeste and so forth. But it was always Cameron's big dream. We've been friends since 2005, and I'm the one who convinced him to move to Berlin, actually. Yes, he stayed with me and here in my apartment, and we played duets on my piano and my organ in my music room, and we've had a great time. And it was always his big dream, and he spent years planning out stop lists and so forth. And I mean, what a great luxury to have your own instrument and be able to take it anywhere. You know, it's not cheap to take it places. It's a big amount of real estate in that organ, and speakers and everything, computers and whatnot. But I think, look, I believe that you should always realize your life dreams. I've been very blessed in that way. Many of my life dreams have come true. And Cameron's, this was Cameron's life dream, and I say bravo to that. Bravo to anybody who has the focus and the energy to make their life dreams come true.
Yeah, that's a truly amazing dream and a huge work which went into that, because just outside all the keyboard which we can see is, it's just a huge, even bigger system which is hidden there.
But it's based on the American symphonic organ principle, really.
Yes, exactly. This was my actually only experience with American symphonic organ, which is huge.
Yes. Well, you should go over there and try some of them.
I would like to. I'm just looking that we have only 15 minutes left. So, guys, first of all,
okay, fire away.
First of all, guys,
quick questions.
Your questions are better than mine, so go and try them down. I have mine here, and I'm just waiting for yours. And we're taking all the questions, all the comments, everything you want. And I will ask you a complicated question, because I mean, you've been talking about playing for presidents, about jumping into performances because you can prepare the music so fast.
Yes.
And it kind of leads me to a question: how to be a good self-manager being a musician?
Well, fortunately, I have a wonderful manager. He's been my manager for 25 years, Christian Francesconi in Rome, and I was one of his first artists, and now his management is large, and he has artists. I mean, his opera singers perform in La Scala and Covent Garden, everywhere. I mean, so it's important to have that trust. In terms of my own life, I mean, I've had personal assistants at times and secretaries and whatnot. You know, you get to a point, of course, in your career where you're in demand, and that's where I am. And people, you establish yourself, people know your work, and they engage you. But still, I get to know people, I make contacts along the way, and I make friends. I mean, I actually make friendships. And I would have to say a good piece of advice is to know that 75% of a musical career is based on relationships. Of any career, really. It's based on your relationships with people. Many people who I've made friendships with over the years, eventually some of them had gone into big positions as impresarios, as heads of orchestras, music directors, heads of concert series for organ and piano, and they engaged me because we also had friendships along the way. I'm actually a very relaxed person, and I have a wonderful circle of friends all over the world, really.
It actually makes me think of what you said once as you've been at the OrganTalk forum.
Yep.
You said you want to be invited again when you play.
Exactly.
And it also was, as that discussion was resonating with the fact of creating concert programs.
Yes.
What do you think? Because I mean, you see the organ world a little bit from the outside, because there are so many other sides to your activities, and you're not diving in the way, for example, many of us do.
Yeah.
How does the organ world look for you?
I have no idea who the up-and-coming young organists are. I don't follow those things. I'm so busy with my own work. So I'm not. Even though I play probably between 10 and 20 organ recitals a year. And then there are piano recitals and the conducting engagements. I'm not really in the organ world like I used to be years ago, where that was my principal activity. But what was your question? I'm sorry, Alexandra, we got off topic. What was the question?
I was just thinking, first of all, how does the organ world look? Does it look like for you from being in and out at the same time? And what do you think should we work on? What's the road?
Well, I'll tell you. You can take a very good lesson from my friend Cameron Carpenter. There's a man who has incredible self-marketing sense. And it has to be like a magnet. You have to attract people to the instrument. Playing in a very academic way and sort of boring your audiences. I mean, you might do all the correct rules, but if you don't thrill them, if you don't move them to tears from incredibly beautiful playing, there's no point, right? We're at a disadvantage to begin with, because basically when we play organ recitals, unless you're in a concert hall, or in a case like Cameron, you have your own instrument, we're not seen when we play. We're up in the Orgelempor, you know, the gallery, behind the, and often behind the Rückpositiv. So nobody sees us. They hear us, but they don't see us until we take a bow. Or unless now, of course, there are people using video cameras and screens. So that's great. I think that's a big plus. But I think the idea is to play interesting repertoire, and to play it beautifully and to play it well. And it can be repertoire that's part of the core repertoire, or it can be pieces that are new, that people have not heard before. Not only just contemporary works, but maybe pieces that you've discovered from other centuries. You know? That's what it is. But listen to non-organ music. Listen to as much symphonic repertoire, as much Lieder, the song repertoire. Listen to chamber music, because when you learn how other people, great artists in other parts of classical music, perform, and what makes them special, what makes their performance special, you are influenced by that. You see? In other words, when I give master classes, I'm constantly teaching organists how to listen to themselves and what they should listen to. And I mean, these are people with advanced degrees in universities. But one thing I find myself saying constantly in my master classes, my organ master classes, think like a musician, not an organist.
That's what my teacher always told me in Berlin. That actually true.
With whom did you study here?
With Paolo Crivellaro.
Who?
Paolo Crivellaro, who is a teacher at the University of Arts, Universität der Künste.
Is he a well-known improviser? Is that who?
No, he isn't. He actually does not improvise.
Oh, I don't know who that is. But again, I don't know who a lot of people are. So.
He's a great specialist of Italian music.
I know who you're talking about now.
Only.
I know who you're talking about
not
now.
only.
Yes, I've forgotten his name. I did hear him play once Italian music. I thought he was marvelous. I really enjoyed it. Full of rhythm and life. I know who you're speaking about now, yes. I don't know who the faculty is there now.
Yeah, he was always saying, "Oh, don't play like an organist."
He's right. He's completely right.
Yeah.
Play like an
Because
Italian.
I think it's kind of became a name for less sensitive playing, maybe, which is a pity, but it kind of did. But yeah, this is a fact. I will. So we have only 7 minutes left. So let me go to a question which, for this season of the Organ Talk, was a question for every single guest. Is about the top 5 organs, in your opinion, an organist has to discover in order to be well-rounded.
I'll give top 5 in the United States and top 5 here in Europe, because it's really
perfect.
Yes.
Wait, I will write it down.
Okay. Well, first is St. Luke's Episcopal Church in Evanston, Illinois, which is the organ on which I grew up as a boy. And then the second organ is Rockefeller Chapel at the University of Chicago, where I studied with Edward Mondello for the next 4 years of my organ study, all throughout high school, from ages 14 to 18. And then Grace Cathedral, San Francisco, where I was visiting guest organist in residence for 2 seasons. That's such a glorious instrument. And then Woolsey Hall at Yale University. Now, all of these organs are great, big symphonic organs. Now, on a whole different plane, the 5th organ, there's another one. Bakersfield, California, First Baptist Church, now known as Olive Street Baptist Church. Very interesting. It's 2 organs combined. It was Virgil Fox's 4-manual house organ, and the G. Donald Harrison Aeolian Skinner of Appleton Chapel Memorial Church, Harvard University. Virgil bought that organ, and he sold all the pipework from his house organ in Englewood, New Jersey, and the Harvard organ to the church in Bakersfield. And it was all adjusted and voiced, and it's 4 manuals, 140 stops across the front of the room on Shemads in 16/8 and 4, and every orchestral sound you can imagine on it. If you want to hear it in all its glory, go to YouTube and listen to my recording, my performance of the Liszt Adnos on that organ. You
I
will hear, and you have to use good earbuds or headphones or speakers because you must hear all the colors. I'm very proud of that performance. I performed at that church many times, and the Lis Adnos, it was captured. It was fantastic. I mean, I'm proud of the performance, but I'm also proud of the organ, which is beautiful. So I recommend that. Alexander Frey Music is my YouTube channel. Oh, so sorry. And then the Bushreisinger Museum at Harvard, which was owned by E. Power Biggs, that Flentrop. I played it. The action is perfect. Every stop on that organ is gorgeous. And of course, it's one of the most recorded organs in the world. E. Power Biggs made so many recordings on that organ. Now, Europe. Here in Berlin. Berliner Dome, of course. I've performed there quite a few times. There's a Hill organ from England, which was brought over in its entirety. And it's gorgeous with a brand new console, but the original facade. It's a huge instrument, really, for 3 manuals, and it's a beautiful organ. The Seifert in the Matthiaskirche near Nollendorfplatz.
yeah.
Beautiful.
Oh, it's all my.
So then let's move out of those are my 3 favorite organs in Berlin. Then the Sauer in the Thomaskirche in Leipzig. I performed a concert on that. What a beautiful, warm instrument. Glorious. The Schnittger in Norden.
Oh yeah.
Fantastic.
Tower.
Going to France, Saint-Ouen, where you will be playing soon.
Yes.
In Rouen. That's a beautiful example of Cavaillé-Collada's finest and an unaltered instrument in a glorious room. In England, St. Mary's Ratcliffe in Bristol. Glorious instrument, and Westminster Abbey. I love the organ at the Abbey. So I think that's the ones I can think of. Oh, the Schnittgers in Alkmaar and Zwolle, and of course the Babelkirk in Haarlem.
Yes, in Haarlem.
So those are what I can think of right away.
These are some amazing instruments, and thank you so much for bringing it up and just making us all think about these amazing sounds and sensations you get when you play
You're welcome.
these instruments.
You're welcome.
Well, we have almost 2 minutes left, and I think at this point I just have to say thank you so much for all this time you've taken to talk to us and for everything you have shared. It's a really amazing moment and amazing possibility to be able to talk to you.
Thank you. Well, I love talking with you, and I think your platform here and your program is wonderful. And continue it, and I think it's very informative for everyone. And bless you and your work. God bless you, and hope to see you sometime. And thank you to your viewers for joining in.
Thank you so much. Thank you, dear viewers, for being with us all this time. I wish you all an amazing evening, and I'm very excited to see you all very soon. It was a pleasure to be here with you, and yeah, Alex, thank you just again. It's a treasure to talk to you.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Have a great evening, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.